plus étonnante et détonnante.
Est-il raisonnable de donner la liberté? Vous êtes tous des hommes, là. Il y a des millions de femmes en France et on est en train de discuter de savoir si on doit leur donner la liberté.
La situation mérite attention.
Witch TV.
Depuis les années 1970, la sorcière représente la puissance des femmes. Elle est aussi un manifeste artistique de la convergence entre les luttes féministes et écologistes. Les sorcières sont revenues dans l'art des années 2010 comme une force de résistance pour les minorités de genre à l'heure de la catastrophe environnementale. Penser aux sorcières, c'est aussi inscrire les luttes actuelles dans la longue durée. Quels sont les usages de l'histoire chez les artistes engagés dans le féminisme et l'écologie? Est-ce que la chasse aux sorcières a réprimé le pouvoir des femmes au Moyen Âge? Est-ce que les références au monde pré-moderne sont une forme de résistance au capitalisme patriarcal? Pour tenter de répondre à ces questions, nous avons invité des théoriciennes et des artistes à nous parler de sorcellerie, du monde médiéval, de l'art des années 70 et des pratiques actuelles. Susan Heskey, you're an artist. You were trained in art as well as in landscape design and permaculture. You work with video, drawings, as well as ceramics, tapestry, and audio podcasts. When I discovered your work, I had the impression that you dealt with medieval knowledge with the same tools as you dealt with contemporary politics. The work that had more direct references to pre-modern art is your tapestry project, Noble Pastoral. Can you tell us about this project and about your attraction to medieval art in general?
It's true. I do spend a lot of time looking at medieval imagery, and it's through making a series that I kind of understood. I was having a lot of illustrations to do, and I was working on those ceramics. And so I was looking for motifs because I had so many illustrations to do. And I was talking with local folks, and someone told me about flying saucers. So I included the motif of the flying saucer in the illustration. And because I was trying to echo some past ceramic practices of the town I was in, I realized that the old ceramics had dragons, and I had included flying saucers. So it made me understand that, of course, people had seen dragons the same way, of course, people now see flying saucers. It gave me an entry point into looking at those images with a certain respect of stories that were being vehicled at the time. But digging a little further, there's something that's emancipated in the way people are drawing back there, because the drawings are not contained by academic knowledge. There's this freedom where there's no perspective. A house is as big as a snail, as big as a person, and it's kind of reveals the truth. If a snail is big, it's because people were spending so much time in their gardens, they probably had to deal with a lot of snails and et cetera, et cetera. So for me, it holds a lot of pre-capitalist, patriarchal freedom, which apparently, I mean, I'm not an historian, so everything I learn is kind of like gleaned and intuitive and patched together. But it does seem like this is a time where there was commons, and it's before the landscape is all chopped up and before enclosure. And I just learned recently, which is exciting to me, is because I'm reading a book about the medieval ages from the perspectives of pigs, because their worldview has also changed throughout time. There's this idea of being post-Roman Empire and not wanting to go back to that. And I feel like that's interesting.
And you also work on myth and tales, reading the medieval literature specialist Philip Walter. Can you tell us about the investigation on tales that you are currently carrying out, and why you chose to do it with Starhawk and Earth activist training.
So, yeah, I'm diving into this new body of work that is taking me straight to medieval times and before, if I can. I'm working on trying to cross-reference folktale, myth, and earth knowledge, or like what is actually true about earth, and it implies looking at the details. And of course, the older the text are, the older the image are. I mean, of course, it's a patchwork because we don't know, but the older things are, maybe the more we're getting closer to some earth knowledge. And to give you an example, while reading an older version of Cinderella, her father gives her a twig, and she plants the twig and waters it with her tears, and it grows, and it's an hazelnut tree, and a bird comes. And further along in the fairy tale, there's an orchard where there's really juicy pears. Well, when you talk to someone that's a mycologist or someone that's an agronomist, they know that the hazelnut tree will host the microorganisms that are really good for an orchard. So when her father gives her an hazelnut twig, he's giving her abundance in the orchard if she can take care of that. So it's an investigation. I don't know where it's going to take me, and it's about looking at those details and how are they actually threaded to a different way of knowing Earth, and how is it tied to Starhawk? Starhawk is a teacher of permaculture and regenerative agriculture, so she has this interest. She's already investigated folktale, like she wrote a book called The 12 Wild Swans, where she unpacks this folktale and sees how it's a path through life. You know, the same way some folks are looking at the cantic of birds as a spiritual growth path, and that's what she does. And she tries to unlock the tale in a different way. So that's how we're collaborating on this research. And yeah, medieval, it's taking me a lot of random places.
Silvia Federici, thank you for being here. You've been teaching political philosophy in the USA and for 3 years in Nigeria, trying to think together feminist and Marxist theories. You've published many books, among which Caliban and the Witch, Women, the Body and Primitive Accumulation, and Witches, Witch Hunting and Women, but also many other books that have been translated into different languages. I wanted to ask you what was the link between the fight of the right for women for their body, like the fight for the legalization of abortion, and the emerging research on women's history and witch hunt history?
I think that it has been a very, very important connection. From the beginning of the feminist movement, there was a realization very well expressed by Virginia Woolf, you know, when she commented that going to the library and looking for books on women, she would find empty shelves. And the idea that we had been absent from history, and that all the history about women had been written by men, had been written from a very biased and unilateral political viewpoint, right? Stimulated an enormous desire to recreate, reconstruct, learn that history. And my work was part of it. But I was part of a whole broad initiative by feminists, which was in fact to reconstruct what has been the history of women before capitalism and in capitalism. And for example, my work on the witch hunts and primitive accumulation, the place of women, the changes of reproduction in the transition to a capitalist economy, a capitalist political system. It's part of their work. And I think that to this day, the historical dimension is crucial. For example, in the case of the battle for the right to abortion, it has shown that throughout, from the very beginning of capitalist society, the state, has attempted and made a concerted effort to establish its control on the body of women with very severe legislation, punishing at first also contraception, introducing the death penalty to any form of activity that could be seen as infanticide, forbidding abortion, and that way put our struggle in a perspective, bringing to the surface, the whole connection, between procreation and the labor market, procreation and the production of the workforce, and revealing the continuity of the interest of the state in this respect, which in the course of time takes different forms, corresponding to the changes in the economic and political system, but nevertheless, reveals continuities. And I think the reconstruction of history has their role. And I think it's interesting that every new phase of the women's movement has gone back, has been accompanied by a return. And every time we reread history, and of course, from the viewpoint of what is necessary for the struggle of the moment. So there's not one linear reading of history, right? But the historical dimension is essential. And also we have seen now in very recent weeks and months with the development of the Black Lives Matter movement, how every intense moment of struggle, almost forces on us the need to reinterpret what it means, right? By placing it on a broader temporal line, on a broader temporal dimension. And this it's essential. It's to whatever we do.
And do you think that the references to pre-modern or medieval work have a specific impact? And do you think that this impact is different, from during the fight of the 1970s, 1980s and nowadays?
Yeah, I think the return to the medieval period, as at a place, an important place, in a number of ways. And I can speak of two in particular that have been very important. First of all, it has been important because it has enabled us to understand the specificity of the social relation, the social category, that have developed with capitalism. In other words, contrasting, being able to contrast, for instance, the position of women in the family with relation to sexuality, relation to men, and in the medieval period, and then in capitalism. Of course, keeping in mind all the differences, right? Because there have been important differences in terms of class, in terms of course, colonization, racialization, etc. But going back to the pre-capitalist time has enabled us to understand what is specific to capitalism and to defeat the idea, misogyny has always been there, this naturalizing tendency to interpret social development, to interpret social history from a kind of naturalizing viewpoint that basically says, it's always there, and in a way gives it indirectly a legitimacy. The other important is that looking at, in particular, the feudal world in Europe, right, has put us in contact, with organization, ways of organizing life that I think, again, are extremely inspiring from the point of view of a contrast, from the point of view of telling us it doesn't have to be this way. So returning to the Middle Ages in particular, we have encountered communitarian, forms of reproduction, communitarian forms, of labor. Clearly the medieval working class, let's call it this way, right? The serf and so on, were not in charge, were not in control, of the wealth and the land, etc. Nevertheless, the class relation, the relation to the feudal lords was very different. It was not based on monetary relations. It was based on the fact that they had communally land in use. They had customary rights. They had rights that basically had a communitarian basis. And that had a profound effect on social relations. A lot of the work that was done by women and men was done in a collective way. People had collective relation to exploitation. And that sedimented a different culture, sedimented different possibility in front of struggles. And so that kind of comparison, the idea of the commons, for example, for me, studying, returning to the feudal world was really the encounter with the commons, and the encounter with a time where, for example, women did everything communally. They would not wash or farm and so on, individually, right? And to contrast this exasperated individualism that you find, in capitalist society, which has been cultivated and now is constantly relaunched, and contrasted in that with this profoundly collective forms of life, I think has been very inspirational, and also has enabled us to make the connection between European history and history, for example, of the regions that Europe has colonized. In Latin America, of course, the indigenous population of Latin America still today hold on, and they fought for it for generations, but they hold on to their communitarian structures. And so to see that continuity has also again enabled us to have a deeper, more structural vision of the differences, what has been the historical change the capitalism has brought on the face of the earth, and where do we want to go? Has been important also. Obviously, there is no return to the past. We are not returning to the past, but nevertheless, the idea of a world beyond the isolation, beyond this phony idea of the self-reliance through individualization, through individualism, actually it's a policy of impoverishment, not as a policy of self-reliance. Strength is really in the collectivity. And so all of that has been crucial.
And my last question was about your experience in Nigeria and how you analyzed new forms of witchcraft persecutions in relation to the studies of historical and ancient forms of witch hunting.
When I was in Nigeria, I had this basically a contract appointment where I would spend period there, teaching courses and so on. And it was an amazing encounter that in a way, once again, transformed my life, because, it was learning about a whole new different world, having a more concrete experience of what colonization meant, but also not only of what colonization meant, but also of what had been, African culture before colonization, and the, again, counted with a whole other world that helps to expand our imagination, helps to deconstruct this idea that capitalism is natural. And in the midst of this, in the middle of all this, for many years now, together with the IMF and with the World Bank, you have had the arrival of these Pentecostal evangelical sects who, like the missionaries of the past, have brought a very perverse kind of Christianity, in my view, that again uses the idea of the devil, Satan. It's a type of Christianity, very Calvinistic, if you want, a new kind of Calvinism that argues that enrichment is good and is a sign of salvation. And if you're not rich, if you're poor, it's either because something is wrong with you or because people in your community are conspiring against you. So as I'm learning, actually, I've been very interested, I'm working on it. It seems that one of the functions of these evangelical sects has been to support, right? To justify, to neutralize the opposition, to this expansion of capitalist relation. And basically to assist culturally in the war against the commons, against communitarian obligation, and having a function of supporting the growing individualism that tell people, think of yourself, don't think of the community, and but be careful because the community represents a danger, because there is all these satanic conspiracies and so forth. So it's a very explosive myth, and we have seen that thousands of women have already been killed in the most atrocious way. In the north of Ghana, for instance, there are concentration camps for women accused of being witches who have been expelled from their villages. And this, is not a leftover of, a previous culture. It's something that's been really reinjected. And I think it's reinjected in a way that serves the interest, of expanding capitalist relation and the displacement of people from their ancestral lands.
Thank you very much again. I just wanted also personally to thank you, because I'm really understanding better and better how difficult it is to take capitalism out of our minds, and I think works like yours really help us to think of a world where we don't think that it's necessary, that some things are necessary and we can live in another way.
Yes. I think it's important that we travel through different time spaces as much as we can, and not because everything conspires to tell us that what is here now has to be eternalized, and what is here, it's the best, and close our imagination. I think they expand in our imagination, and I think this is the product of a struggle. It's not an accident that every time you have a struggle, an important struggle, a transformative struggle, you have also this need to connect to other realities. And this is what I think the women's movement has done. And this is why now, when we go to the library, we find that the shelves are not empty anymore.
Yes, that's true. So thank you again very much.
S'il vous plaît, soyez comme le duvet, soyez comme la plume d'oie des oreillers d'autrefois. J'aimerais ne pas être portefaix, s'il vous plaît, faites-vous léger, moi je ne peux plus bouger. Ce n'est que moi, c'est elle ou moi, celle qui parle ou qui se tait, celle qui pleure ou qui est gaie, c'est Jeanne d'Arc ou bien Margot, fille de vagues ou de ruisseaux. Et c'est mon cœur ou bien le leur, et c'est la sœur ou l'inconnue, celle qui n'est jamais venue, celle qui est venue trop tard, fille de rêve ou de hasard. Et c'est ma mère ou la vôtre, une sorcière comme